go ahead and welcome everybody tonight and call the November 7th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Welcome everybody. The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from our October 3rd meeting. Commissioners, y'all have had those for about a week. Any changes that need to be made? If not, I will accept a motion.
So moved.
We've got a motion to accept the minutes as written. Do I have a second? Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion for the minutes passed unanimously. Second item on the agenda is old and new business. The only old and new business item that we have is Ally presented a meeting date and submittal date deadlines in our calendar of when the meetings would be for 2023. Any concerns or questions about those? If not, these two have to be passed by a motion, don't they? If not, I will accept a motion to accept the dates as given.
Move to accept the dates as given.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is ZC 2206. This is a public hearing to look at a amendment to the Fairhope East PUD out on Highway 181. Any changes? PUDs are actually what's the word I'm looking at? Ordinances. PUDs are actually city ordinances, and the city council has the authority to make those changes. We do not. So we basically make a recommendation to the city council for any PUD change, and ultimately the city council makes that change. So we will be looking at that, and we will make a request. We will make a motion to either recommend or not recommend the PUD as presented, or we'll make a motion to recommend the PUD with some changes. One thing to remember in this PUD is at this point, we aren't looking at landscaping. We're just looking at more the general intent and character and how that fits. Items such as landscaping and ingress, egress in those areas come into much more detail under the multi-occupancy plan at a later point. So as far as if people talk about, exact minutia details of landscape issues or drainage issues, those would be presented at a later date through a MOP hearing. So this time I'll turn the mic over to Hunter.
Thank you. And I will, Casey put a lot of work into this, so when it comes to details, I'm going to look to her, and if she reaches over and hits me, nobody call HR. She's doing it with my blessing to make sure I don't miss anything. This is a PUD amendment of a project originally approved in 2009. It is 10 acres. I'm going to go ahead and skip through this to show you where it's at. It is an existing PUD shown on the left side of the screen in a light blue color. The aerial's on the right side of the screen in current condition of the site. Just to kind of run as a quick summary, we're going to talk about the comparison between the previously approved PUD and this PUD as we work through this, but just to lay the groundwork, this was approved in 2009. The property's changed owners. I think we've seen a couple of projects at the staff level through the years, but nothing ever made it. Right now, it consists of 5 lots fronting Highway 181. We'll get to that site plan in just a second. But the uses are listed on the screen within that PUD. As you probably know from your staff reports, there was no buildings approved. So when you see that, you have to be a little bit more strict in your uses, everything else, because you really don't know what's going to come other than the lots is approved. The site plan, the exhibit that came with that ordinance in 2009 is on the left-hand side of the screen. As you can see, there are 5 lots, an internal drive, and the proposed site plan is on the right-hand side of the screen. I do want to make one caveat here. When this plan on the left went through Planning Commission, there was a road connecting this intersection with the entrance, I think that's Orleans Drive, with the Idlewild subdivision. By the time it made it to council, there was, I think a lot of the residents in Idlewild was not happy with that road. So the PUD amendment was changed to allow pedestrian connectivity with an emergency access activated gate, the signal activated gate. So that's a little, always goes into when we start reviewing something. And I will say, I'll go ahead and point out here, there's a 20-foot drainage easement in the previously approved PUD, as well as a 20-foot buffer, so 40-foot total off the property line. Unfortunately, those were reversed on this plan. The drainage easement's actually adjacent to the property line. The 20-foot should be on the inside because there's a detention pond here for Idlewild that outfalls into it. During this plan would have been this pond and then further to the east underneath 181. So we can start looking at how that works. The easement here, the pond and area is very similar to the location, although the aesthetic changed. This is the proposed site plan. We do have, I think we discussed this briefly as an informal review months ago. We have more details available to us in this PUD. I want to make sure we're clear there because we ask for things to make sure they can fit. But we're not approving every detail here. So we're not, as Lee mentioned, we're not going to approve a drainage plan. But I want to kind of highlight what this does include. It does include a hotel. And the chart we on the next slide shows restaurants, retail, and then I believe these 4 units have a residential above that. To provide some connectivity, they'll have there's a wetland here, wetland buffer, and they provided a boardwalk through that because we wanted to make sure we had connectivity to the property to the north and to the south. There is a large highway construction setback here, so the boardwalk comes back into the lot. I think we need to work on the location of that exactly, but it does tie in. And from the onset, what they wanted to create here was kind of a plaza internal courtyard. So the most of the parking's in the rear, a few parking spaces out front of the internal drive, which is one way, and then creating of this get out of your car and walk from business to business. So that was the guiding principle. This is the aerial of the shot of the property as you see today. We kind of roughly overlaid what that looks like and where things are located. So you will see a traffic study. In the traffic study, there will be a light installed and turn lanes to accommodate this. There's one light coming out of Walmart. They will be installing an additional signal facing that side. Yes.
To be clear, the previous PUD had 2 pedestrian connections, one at the foreground of this image at that, and
Yes.
then one in the center, and this PUD just has 1 pedestrian connection.
Right. That's what's being proposed right now. Yes.
Would that be looked at now or would that be looked at later?
If you would like to see pedestrian connectivity through that right away, I think it would be a good time to add the requirement. How we do accomplish it, we can handle in the MOP. It lines up pretty well down here. I think that's feasible. And we've got a quick video. We did get a drone out here, so just kind of looking at the property. It does speed up a little bit here in a second and might make us sick, but I'm going to try to slow it down.
Those cars really going fast.
They are. This is sped up about 4 times actual speed, so we have this available and I think we've got pretty much every inch of the property. If we need to come back and review something and see what it looks like, we have it. So there's the detention pond to the south on the Idlewild property. The tree line you see is where the drainage easement and the buffer is. And that's the intersection lining up with Walmart where the traffic signal will be. And backing up, this is Orleans Drive where you can see where the connectivity of the sidewalk and what we put on is golf cart or
Well-
low-speed vehicle entrance.
What would the other connectivity be? What was,
So let's see, if required,
Yeah.
that would be, it's an unopened right-of-way, but
Yeah.
if you see, it's, let me see if I can pause this at the right spot. Right when we changed there. Oh, so this road was never opened up into a,
okay.
so that would be through this area here.
Pedestrian.
And I'll take this opportunity to note that the tree line is dense here. We're going to get into buffers and what is there today and what's being proposed. But while we're here looking at this, instead of coming back to it, you can notice one piece of this property does not have any landscape. That will have to be accommodated.
Okay.
Little bit of the architectural. The two at the top are the two buildings that has retail, commercial, and office below with a residential unit above. I believe those are 2,100 square feet. Is that right? Oh, it's right here. 2,100 square feet, 3,000 square foot total. So first floor is 1,500, second floor is 1,500 square feet. So that gives you an idea of the size. These are conceptual. This is the hotel. I know there was a lot of concerns about a hotel being there. I will say the developer has altered the hotel plans. It was originally 3 stories, then 2.5 with a pool on the half, and now down to 2 stories. So this is the use chart where there was 12 buildings. So I'm not going to call those units. I want to make sure we're clear when we get to units, the MOP. There are 12 buildings. That's broken up into retail, restaurant, a hotel, obviously, and then the 4 units with commercial below and residential above, and then 2 larger restaurants. There is 1 drive-through proposed on the northern end of the building. We've kind of worked on that. How could that be accommodated? And basically, the loop road through was turned into a one-way because that created a lot of issues trying to get a 2-way road. Setbacks, I want to kind of talk about this a little bit. I don't think there's any problems. I just want to make sure we're accommodating. These setbacks previously were 110 feet in the front and 40 foot in the rear. They've proposed 60 foot and 20 foot. I want to kind of flip back here just
60 in the front, 20 in the rear.
Yes, so 60 on this side. That's where the highway construction setbacks are. This is a site plan driven. So if you look here, the building line is here. So although they're proposing the setback to be 60 feet, the buildings are actually closer to that 110 foot mark. So what I would propose here is the front setback is as shown, and they provide us a dimension for that, and we'll get it in the ordinance. It may be 106, it may be 105. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but, and then the 40 foot, I would say the rear setback is 40 foot. I don't think there's any conflict there. There's a 20-foot drainage easement and a 20-foot landscape buffer. So I would recommend we keep those as previously approved.
60 feet what Aldi wants?
Yes.
Is that their plan?
Yes.
Is that 60 feet for one side of the expanded 4-lane?
Yes.
The other side's going on the east side of 181?
Yeah, and you can see that was planned during the Walmart. See, there's the sidewalk
Yeah.
there and how far that is back. So you would have a similar situation here if it's ever expanded on this side.
Hopefully sooner than later.
Yes, yes. So, jumping back into here, there is an exception. The building height exception is, and I can show you this, it's 2-story hotels, but you see there's parapets to give it some architectural detail along the length of that building. So they're asking for these parapet at the max to be 38.5 feet, but that's the parapet to hide the roof equipment. Otherwise, it's a 2-story building. Building coverage, the previously approved ordinance maximizes at 30%. Again, there was no building plans. This one maxes at 19%. Lot coverage is allowed up to 80%. They're hitting the 39% mark. again, these are conceptual plans. I want to keep the requirement in ordinance 1402. I like this. It's a little generic, but I think we know what it means. All buildings have four-sided architecture, so we don't have just blank walls that are efficient, but do not look good. Exterior lighting, there is a conflict in the landscape plans show a different product. I think this was what we've seen, so this is what we're going by, but I do want to note, in case we need to discuss anything, there was a lot of concern, I think, from adjacent neighbors that light pollution coming into the neighborhood. We have a requirement, foot candles, in the subregs and the zoning ordinance. Regardless of what height the lights are, what style they are, they cannot penetrate on that property line. We do have a photometric plan they've shown that accommodates that. Now, I also want to point out the previously approved PUD had a limited exterior lighting to 10 foot high. That's pretty short for exterior lighting. It means a lot of lights. They proposed 14 to 24 foot for those. That doesn't change the fact that they would have to be shielded or designed to not be a bother on neighboring properties. So if you think that's acceptable, we can move forward, but the existing requirement is 10 feet.
What determines the 14 or the 24?
You, ultimately, city council.
Okay.
It's PUD, so if there's,
But I mean, they didn't have, it's
That's a
not
big
like they
range.
wanted, they wanted a certain height in one area and another height in another area.
yes, I mean, they have two products, so one being 14 foot, one being 24. I don't know if this is the case, but I know we've seen a lot of times in subdivision regulations, waiver requests, because we have a 20-foot height limit of street lights. Well, I can't remember if it's Riviera or Baldwin MC does not have a 20-foot light. They have a 24-foot light. So I don't know if that's why we're seeing the 24-foot, 15, 16. So that's that may be it, but if you're taller, you don't have to have as many, so maybe that's on the front end, and it's something we can look at specifically during the MOP.
I don't think they'll be buying their lights from Riviera on this.
No, I don't think so, but
Yeah, you don't have to have as many, but you're more likely to see the source.
yes. So,
LED lighting is a lot better than the old vapor lights, because you can see a vapor light about 8 miles.
and these LEDs can be shielded and to some extent, so I would, and again, we got a revised lighting plan on Friday that has a different lighting. So if you want to be limited, if you want to limit it to a height now, or if you want to kind of pass that off to the MOP when we have a detailed plan that we can actually review before we get in here, be happy to do that. Either way.
I think the MOP would be fine, but I think that,
They're trying to buy.
10 feet wasn't put in there by accident. And, the light was one of the things when this PUD was done that was really a concern of the light pollution.
So procedurally, are we at that point where I could ask that question, or shall we? Just in terms of if we approve something, if we approve this and there's a description that the height ranges from 14 to 24, and then we get to the MOP and we're trying to enforce 10,
Yeah.
is that going to be?
I would suggest if collectively you choose to approve, you make a condition that lighting sticks to 10 feet. Then we all know what we're looking for moving forward. We do not have that condition, so if anybody wants to make a note of that, if it gets to that point, I think that's okay and better to know now for us and for the applicant that when we go to finalize plans. So parking on this is, if you look at just the base zoning ordinance, 276 parking spaces are required. We do allow a shared parking plan that the property owner can juggle. They've provided that draft, very good draft, I would say. And are providing 228. No hours of operation were provided.
Wait a minute.
Yes, sir.
Go back to parking.
Mm-hmm.
What is the, give me an example of a draft parking agreement. Well, I mean, it'd be like somebody goes to work from 8 to 5, and then after 5 o'clock, somebody that sort of becomes usable for something else?
The agreement protects the city on something, but yes, that is in theory what is happening. You're gonna have some businesses with peak hours during the daytime, some in the evening. So there's no sense in having a sea of parking that's never fully utilized. What the agreement does is it protects the city a little bit when future property owners, everybody that takes a lease within a property that has that agreement knows that going in. So they don't come back and say, we need more parking in the future. We want to take out the wetlands or the park or something else. Everybody knows this going in. So that's the draft parking agreement that establishes that.
Okay, and in terms of parking, I guess it would be during the discussion of the MOP where we would maybe talk about pervious parking areas? Or
I think you can accommodate that now if you want. I mean, I think they've
think
included some percentages. And it's certainly something we can discuss in detail.
it just seems that there's so, I've done a lot of research on looking at different pervious paving operations now. There's just so many different things that are available. I'm sure Rebecca knows a lot more about it. She probably forgot more than I ever knew, but that would be the days of us having a Walmart parking lot or one of these major, or like Big Lots over on Greeno Road. Those days need to be over.
Well, and I will show you this. The widest area is the most impervious that are pervious. That's the asphalt drive. And then all of the parking that they have are pavers. That is correct, right?
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
It's in there.
So they are providing that. I don't know if we got into details on what the internal kind of plaza would be, but certainly something we can look at in detail with at the MOP. But yes, all of the hatched areas are pavers instead of asphalt.
Well, while we're talking about whether we do it now, we do it at MOP, just my personal opinion, and maybe everybody else got a different opinion, but it doesn't seem logical to do a little bit here and then have to wait and then do a little bit somewhere else at MOP. Either we need to do it or we don't need to do it, it seems to me.
Casey, do we have a percentage on what was impervious versus?
Well, I'm not talking
other
about
paving?
parking now, I'm just talking about in general.
Well, so.
The
Well, if it's
different
proposed
issues.
already.
So here's what, again, we have a lot more details than we normally do, but this is a PUD. Just because this shows a drainage plan doesn't mean we've fully reviewed the drainage. What this shows is they have enough room to program all of these uses and accommodate all the, whether it's utilities or drainage or wetland protections. That was kind of our biggest worry, and we wound up with a site plan that showed a hotel and a mixed use, and then all we wound up with was a hotel when we got to the end of the road. So I understand what you're saying, but I also want to make sure we're leaving some for future reviews because we haven't fully vetted some of these things. So,
But if, like, the concept that's influencing the way we think about this is a concept shown with pavers for all the parking spaces. So
Yes.
That,
that would be something, this is site plan driven, so anything shown on the site plan, is what we intend it to be.
okay.
And now, did you have a percentage on what was impervious, what was impervious?
They show the impervious lot coverage as about 36%, but I think that includes all aspects of being
Buildings.
impervious. So they show the building area as 19, so you're looking at probably 20% being asphalt and sidewalk.
And some of that includes the pavers as well. So we probably need to, between now and maybe the engineer can speak to that. Maybe they know a little bit more about that percentage. So, but I know it is shown, and we did discuss like around the trees and the parking area being pavers.
I'd like to add as well, they've got crushed aggregate shown
Okay.
for parking, as well on the southern portion of the property. So that kind of can address the concerns about impervious versus pervious.
And that's here. And we actually went back and forth with the kind of queue on this front side, and not to say everything's 30A, but there was a design, in Alice Beach where there is gravel parking along the side of the road. You know, it's kind of bordered by some pavers, but that was the queue on the front, as you see from that side. There's just some parallel parking up there, not really lined, but kind of that softer instead of the asphalt. Okay. Let's see, getting back to lighting, and so green space, we kind of went back and forth on the green space. If any commercials require 10% green space, this does not fit into our chart. You know, as you all know, to provide a trail system or parkland, you're required to do that in 3-acre increments. A plaza technically needs to be fronted on at least 2 sides by a public road. So being a PUD and being able to do something unique, this is what was shown. So again, they're creating a avenue here, internal pedestrian avenue, boardwalk through the wetlands. This is not a wet pond. I think you'll see that. I'll show you that real quick in the landscape plans. This is what they're proposing. So it's more of a swale instead of a wet pond, with boardwalks interacting and planting material throughout the area. So this is kind of a custom, doesn't really fit in the mold of anything exactly, but this is what is being proposed. There is a little bit of, especially when we get into grading. Okay, so there's your asphalt parking is 7.83% of the uses permitted uses. Thank you. There's the kick I needed. The uses here, and we talked about briefly in the chart, but retail, restaurant, 1 restaurant with a drive-through, that's maximum, hotel, and then office residential mixed use for those 4 buildings we looked at the elevations on. This is the green space. You can see the percentages there. That shows the sidewalk details
Is
and
there any
percentages.
restriction of where that drive-through would go?
It is here.
That's what that.
Yep. This is site plan driven, so this is where it goes.
Where are you? I can't see. To the left?
It is
or-
right on the side of the detention pond here. Yes, sir. So it's on this end. It's this little building would have the drive-through, and you can see kind of the separation for how that works, so it doesn't
Seems like
stack.
that's fighting with the overall idea of this
Yeah,
pedestrian
I
plaza.
don't know about that.
That's
Sorry.
been, that was kind of the idea that they had from the get-go. We talked about keeping it all pedestrian, but they really, wanted to maintain that drive-through. To the point they did change a 2-lane, there was a lot more asphalt here. It was a much wider road, and this was kind of narrowed down to a 1-way to accommodate. So landscape, there is some grading in the wetland buffer that I'm not comfortable with. That's why I don't want to be approving exactly this. And then again, we just received a landscaping buffer or plan. And this is where the existing PUD talks a little bit more about the screening and buffer with the neighboring adjacent residential, which is obviously on the Idlewild side, but also on the south side. The previously approved plan, it required an 8-foot fence. It required a 20-foot heavily landscape buffer that gets into details along those edges that shall consist of hollies, pines, cedars, wax myrtles, native oaks. There should be 3 total rows of landscaping, and then on the other side, it's got the staggered row of trees. This is what we were presented with. I am very concerned with this edge. That's a 20-foot buffer. These plants, we just Googled, and they're 7-foot diameter, taller, evergreen, but that, I think we need to maintain the guidance from the previously approved buffer to ensure we have. Now, some of the comments from the neighbors were to put evergreen in. So I think were trying to address those, but I'm not sure if we actually, with a single row, we're actually accommodating. So up for discussion there on what we actually want to see, but maybe that can be I think the hollies were a good evergreen as required, and then some overstory trees too. Could be the screens from the second story buildings onto the adjacent properties. There's a kind of a blow up of the detention pond area. There's some details here kind of missing, but I pulled this up because they were very accommodating getting the boardwalk through, but I want to look at this in more detail of how this crosses. There's in general, the property slopes from the south to the north. So all of the pervious comes, to this area, and this is a retaining wall to give you an idea. The upper part of the retaining wall, obviously the lower part. These are drains that drain into this area and they put a boardwalk over, and then a boardwalk here out, and then this one. I think looking through how that can be better utilized is important. So I want us to be approving a concept that the north and south ends are connected through pedestrian connectivity, but maybe some flexibility on how those boardwalks look. There's some details missing on what some of these items are in the plans, but in general, some of that landscaping needs to be resolved, and how that's going to be maintained, and where to stay out of. Those wetland buffers are there for a reason. So connectivity, we discussed from the early on how this is going to meet the pedestrian connectivity, and is a drainage through here. So this is a 40-foot bridge and walkway, and how nice that would be if that was at least, because originally there was a 50-foot right-of-way and a road going to be here. So how nice that would be for the residents of Idlewild to have golf carts, to be able to go through there. And we've got a lot of people complaining about a golf cart path. I want to make sure everybody understands. This is on 181. No one can drive into this from 181 in a golf cart. Nobody is bringing a golf cart to the hotel. This was the intent there, was so people in Idlewild can go to restaurants should they have golf carts or be able to walk. That does a lot of things for us when connectivity. It keeps those cars out of, just going around the block out 181. So it helps maintain some of the traffic. That was the intent of why we required those things there. The location of this boardwalk is not finalized. I don't think it's the ideal location within that 50-foot right-of-way. That's something I want to look at in the MOP, how it kind of meanders through there. But the concept's there. And this was I think Casey highlighted this to show, there's not 10 of these, and it's not it's not a thoroughfare. With this, did mention there was a emergency vehicle access provided through the use of a transmitter activated device on the emergency vehicle. We did not include that. I think this kind of sets a wall up and doesn't make efficient use of emergency access. That was, coming around the building of the one way. I don't know if it's any faster than coming from another direction, but it's certainly up for debate. The signage, this is the Boardwalk Village was the revised name, and the signage, monument sign out front is shown on the screen and also included in the landscape plans. And there's your hotel building materials with a brick, painted siding, asphalt shingles, and metal roof. This is a little blow up of the hotel and how that lays out, the room layout. And again, there's the drainage as it outfalls from the pond down to the existing pond of Idlewild that portion of is owned by this property owner now. That was purchased with this property. It came with a lot that crosses their detention pond. So that's the line. Again, we will be reviewing that in more detail during the MOP. There's the grading plan. There's a few things here we need to look at. There's one contour line in that wetland buffer, so how that works. You can see the grade I was talking about where the existing tree line is. This is going to be elevated to get all the water to flow to the north.
that the reason those existing trees are being taken out?
So the existing trees here, well, yes,
Not
yes,
Not
yes.
the big ones,
Yes, yes. And I don't know what I don't know if that's privet. I don't know if there's, anything,
Most of it's covered grass.
there's a lot of weeds in that, and I understand it is a buffer visually, but there is a lot of mess in that area. And even in that drainage, it's gonna have to get cleaned out because it's not functioning properly, so.
So the detention pond to the north flows back to the south and goes to the Idlewild Pond.
Vice versa. Idlewild Pond,
Idlewild Pond comes in, where does it, I can't see where this one goes out.
this one goes into a culvert under 181.
So it goes into the wetlands first, or?
Yes. So it is,
It goes into the wetlands.
it goes into the
Where?
pond and then into the wetlands, and I think it's here. It's where that culvert goes under 181 to the south of Walmart on the,
Okay.
in
yeah.
that area.
I got it.
Yep.
Okay.
So I was reading something, Hunter, on that with the wetlands. It has been exempt from the COE because it's man-made. Is that something that we typically do? There was only a letter written from a consultant on the environmental. It's saying because it was man-made that the COE doesn't have to sign off, but I would like some type of engineering personally, just my opinion. Like my man Arthur says, I think with issues that we have,
Well, and the
I think
wetland was
that's just the
delayed.
ditch that leads
Yeah.
to the wetlands.
This,
Okay.
yeah,
Not the
that's
wet-
just
not the
this
wetlands
linear
Not the
ditch.
wetlands itself. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I want to clarify.
Yeah.
That's why I
Yes.
want to bring it up, just to make sure that I was,
Yeah.
okay, very
Yep.
good.
Yep, the Corps actually looked at that and said
Very
that was
good.
man-made.
That's what I
This was the actual wetlands with a buffer.
Very good.
And we did clarify, we needed proof that this ditch, if you will, was not
Very good.
wetlands now. Little detail of how the drainage and the walkways work. We did see two, as you see in the plans, there are two heritage trees being saved, not many on the site, it's mostly farmland. There are two. Initially, we saw a grading plan that was changing the grade where those trees were 4 to 5 feet. We did get revised plans showing how they're gonna grade that and not have to either bury the tree in 5 feet of dirt or remove 5 feet of roots. So, we did get that detail.
Wait, say that again, Hunter, please.
So, I think one of the challenges when things are moving so fast is sometimes goals not getting met. So we saw one plan that shows, let's save these trees, landscape plan that shows these trees. Then we looked at a grading plan that shows a cut in one area of up to 5 feet. And then in another area, a fill of up to 5 feet. Well, as a forester, you can't cut 5 feet
Either one of
around a
those
tree,
will kill
or
the tree.
fill, so we asked for revised plans, they provided this section that shows how they've changed the grading to accommodate saving those two trees.
What's the grade now? Are they gonna cut anything off?
There's your, can you see that detail?
Yeah. I
Very
can.
minor right there. Existing is the top line.
Anytime you get under the drip line of a tree of that magnitude and you cut anything off of it,
Mhm.
that's where your feeder roots are. They're right at the ground. They're right at ground level. So anytime you remove that much material, I'll give you another good point. Is a Booth Road just south of Fairhope Avenue, right across from the street. You know where the road kind of meanders in? Look at one of those big, it takes it a while, but look at one of those big live oaks that are stuck right in the middle there.
Yeah.
It is all but dead now. It is, I've watched it for a few years, but all that grading and then putting that asphalt in around them, they did a good job trying to maintain it, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
Anyway, they don't have many of these there.
Yeah.
They need to just stay away from them, if at all possible.
I think
Is that for drainage purposes?
there's where the pavers are right at the drip line, so it's kind of hard to do that project and stay completely away from them, but I think they have paved around the
So if you
drip
can
line.
stay out of the drip line, That's the ticket, otherwise we'll be cutting down 3 years from now.
How long was that when they put those roads on Booth?
It's been a while,
About 2 years.
10 years, maybe?
but, how many?
Yeah.
About
About 10
10
years.
years, maybe?
Yeah.
It's a
Maybe.
civil tax project.
Yeah. And then traffic study was done. I think y'all can see that, but we'll have to put a signal on that side and add the turn lanes. Their traffic study warranted that, so they will be required to pay for and install of that, permit that through ALDOT. Here's your culvert. This was the wetland. So blue line there shows the ditch, and then you got the wetlands, and then we add the wetland buffer per our regs. But the culvert is here. That goes across 181 through this drainage swell and back into this area. There's kind of a swell and I believe another pond back here that it hits for, it kind of bypasses Walmart's pond, but there is another pond right there that helps attain that.
So there was, I don't want to drag this out, but there was a note that the owner had purchased part of the other drainage pond to the south. But
That's
part of it? And-
Drainage, the water retention is
Yes.
half on one side parcel, half on the other, kind of screw up.
So if I'm reading tea leaves here, it was the same property owner that developed Idlewild and this residential, or this commercial component.
Okay.
And this is the pond, it looks like duckweed, and all's covering it. A portion of that went with this property when it was
Okay.
purchased. So they are intrinsically tied together in making sure the drainage and all is maintained properly.
Okay, but there was no maintenance. I was just trying to, I guess that's why we require maintenance agreements now. I was
Yes.
trying to go through what happens when silt from here ends up in, we're going from one pond to another pond to a wetland.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, and it was kind of planned, a long time ago. We have since made better, the Idlewild is responsible for maintaining their pond, but it's kind of like, well, if they don't, well, then you're, legally obliged to deal with the downstream property owner. Now, we actually have maintenance plans that are required, recorded, and we monitor those, make sure they are being followed up. There's your improvements as proposed. So anything not included in the ordinance, when it becomes adopted, will fall back to the zoning or subdivision regulations as applicable.
I should know the answer to this, but in our zoning, I'm thinking back about the concerns about light pollution and height.
Mhm.
And other than just managing the potential light pollution for the subdivision with the photometrics, you could also require shielding on the subdivision side of it.
Yes.
But I don't remember that being required in our zoning ordinance.
When we have any, we've put that in, and I think maybe that's where the 10-foot, I don't think we had the 20-foot limit in our regulations.
is
Do you
there
recall
something for
when this
shielding on
first
the-
came through?
if-
Yeah, but, and I think we did state it had to meet the foot candle requirements, but also couldn't penetrate in neighboring properties, so.
Okay.
Being shielded to the residential would be an
We
easy
went round
addition.
and round about it with the bank near Edwards and 98, and
Yes.
because of the residents that were behind that, and I can't remember how they developed it, but I think they shielded it towards the bank instead of
Yeah.
the,
And we talked about that when they first presented this to us about this piece of property. Rebecca, you brought it up. It was one of the key things you brought up that night, was the lighting, to make sure that lighting would be deflected back to that
And-
property, so.
We've seen a few different lighting plans, so, I think our discussion here makes it pretty clear instructions about what we're expecting.
Yeah.
And we can see that detailed lighting plan when we get there and actually see what the product is and make sure it is something that can accommodate that goal.
I saw in the photometrics, in this case, when you've got it along a property line, it's not like in the middle.
Right.
It doesn't need to shine to both sides. It seemed like a very simple, instead of
Absolutely.
even looking at the photometrics, just shield it towards the
Yeah,
residential.
there's nothing going that direction.
And I might be able to interject.
Not yet.
We're gonna, after Hunter finishes, the developer will see if they have anything to add, then we'll open up the public hearing. And that's when we'll take questions, and then we'll get the developer and staff back up to answer any questions if there are questions, it may just be comments, but any questions, we'll then call them back up and get the questions at that point. The public hearing will be open, hopefully in just a few moments, if Hunter will speed up a
Stop
little
talking.
bit.
And I'll stop.
All these questions.
Sorry.
I don't think we've ever had a 45-minute presentation on a refund,
Getting there.
so let's get going.
I think we answered a lot of the questions. So
Well,
there's
let's call this
just.
the mop too, so we don't have to have the
Yes.
mop come back, because we're getting in the weeds.
Yep, and I'm gonna say that's what this slide is. It says, that this is conceptual. We will be dealing with some of these, including but not limited to the examples here on the detail. With that said, staff does recommend approval of CZ 22.06 with the following conditions. Revised green space plan will be required for staff review prior to city council. A revised master development plan will be required for staff review prior to city council. Maintain the landscaping screening buffers as required in ordinance 1402. The rear setback shall be 40 feet. Front setback shall be shown on the site plan. So supply that dimension prior to the city council hearing. And I'm here if y'all have questions, and when, now or in the future.
Already asked him.
Right, yeah, I've already done it. Thanks, Hunter.
All right, would anybody wish to speak on behalf of the developer at this time? Just ask if you had anything to add. You don't have to. Are you with the developer?
Yes.
Okay. If you have anything to add, you can. If not, I'll open the public hearing and call you up after we get any questions from the public. Okay, great. Thank you, sir. All right. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. If you just, when you come up for our records, we need your name and your address. And you have about 3 minutes. Any questions that you ask, I'll write down, and then we'll ask either the staff or the developer at that time, whichever should appropriately answer that question. So if anybody from the public has any questions, please come up to the microphone and state your name and your address. Unless Ally knows it by heart.
We just write you, we already have your name and address down there on every meeting. In fact, on all these meeting agendas, your name's already on there.
Well, we make sure you're in there in the minutes, so don't worry.
Okay, I'm sorry about this.
Come on.
Just two things. In some of the drawings in the press package, it showed pedestrian crossings across 181 coming from the Walmart area over into this area. And that raised some questions in my mind. A pedestrian crossing would require some considerable reworking of that intersection. It's into the central access point on the new property, which is the southern entrance into the Walmart complex. So I don't know whether that was unintentional or whether that's really part of the plan.
I can answer that question, and Hunter, stop me if I'm incorrect. And normally I don't like the chair to answer questions like that because it looks like I'm for or pro or con. But we can have on the development where, obviously we would like connectivity, as we always do, if a guest from the hotel or somebody wanted to go to, Walmart or to Advanced Auto Parts or what have you, as a pedestrian, that hopefully they could safely do that. We can have the sidewalks and whatnot in the PUDs and require that. As far as once the crossing hits Highway 181, AlDOT is in total control of that. We have
Right.
no say.
And what we did do, the old plan explicitly showed where that connectivity was. again, with an Aldott project, especially with the widening, we have no clue if that can be, where that can be accommodated, so it's not shown on the revised plan, crossing 181.
The other thing has to do with low-speed vehicles. I think that it's about time that we clarify the distinction between golf carts and street-legal low-speed vehicles, or whatever we want to call them. They are not the same. Golf carts are for golf courses, and low-speed vehicles sort of look like golf carts, but they're a different animal altogether, and they're street legal. So I really don't think it's a good idea to have the term golf cart in this package. I think it ought to be rewritten to whatever you want to call the street legal cart.
Yeah.
Good
He's
point.
correct, he's correct. Low speed.
Yeah, good point. Well, I'll just start using LSV or something.
Then the other thing is that when I look at this and the businesses and the things that will be present in this development will be a big attraction. People are going to want to get there. And I think they're going to use low-speed vehicles. From anywhere in or around Fairhope, you can get a low-speed vehicle to Walmart. And if you can get to Walmart, you can come across 181 and go to this development.
They
Is it
cannot,
maximum speed?
they can't drive,
You can go across a highway. You can go across Greeno, you can go across 181.
What's the
Not
speed
supposed
limit
to.
on Fairhope Avenue?
they're not supposed to go across.
You can go on 35 then, you can cross over 181, he is
They're not
correct.
supposed to drive the way it's
So I see a fair amount of pressure to get here by, other than what I thought was the access from Idlewild. There'll be other people wanting to do that. And what we're beginning to see on Greeno and some other, and on 181, people in low-speed vehicles going down the highway. So they will do it. They're going to be out there giving it a try. It might be their last stunt, but so anyway, I think that I'd like to see some more consideration to the business of the low-speed vehicles and how that's going to be accommodated in this project. Thank you.
I think that's bigger than
All
this
right.
project.
Would anybody else wish to speak to this item? All right, in that case, I'll go ahead and close the
You've
public.
got somebody.
Oh, all right, let's go.
She's coming.
My mind is on the old time.
I'm Susan Jones, and I live on Margaret Drive.
Okay.
And I back up
What number, Margaret, please?
205.
Thank you, ma'am.
I back up to the retention pond, Idlewild Retention Pond, and it sounded like you were going to do away with the retention pond.
No, ma'am. The point was that half of the retention pond is on this property.
And so,
No changes proposed.
No changes proposed, no
changes
changes. They
proposed.
can't change the retention pond. It was just a
okay.
comment to be.
Now, we're not supposed to talk about water drainage now, but it looked like a lot of the water drainage from paving all this was going to go through the retention pond to the other neighborhoods.
You're uphill, so it'll go from the retention pond
The other way.
to the north, right.
Good. Praise God.
Right. You'll be dumping your water on them, not vice versa, so.
I have a question too.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Wanted to jump up before we cut it off. My name's Steve Irvin. I live at 220 Orleans Drive, 30-year resident, Fairhope, been in Idlewild, been a property owner for 24 years. Just tell you a couple of concerns. The the drive-through restaurant really bothers me. I was here in 2009 opposing, the road coming through. And one of the things that's been nice since then is the vegetation that has grown up, and we actually have a buffer now. That does greatly concern me that that's all going to be cut down. We're going to be starting from scratch. So if there's anything that can be done to save any of the trees that are there now, that would be great. And as I said, that there was no drive-through restaurant in the original, so definitely concerned about the noise of that. To echo what the gentleman just said about the carts, I do have concerns. I live right on Orleans, right where that will come through, that I can see people from other neighborhoods using that as a way to get into this development and go right across the, 181 into Walmart at the red light. So greatly concerned. Personally, I'd love to have no tie to this commercial area. Other concerns, the lighting was just mentioned, going up to 24. I deal with lighting. I've been doing it for 30 years with my job. Shielding is possible, but that's only if every light is facing to the east. If any lights are facing to the west, most of the shielding is always on the back side by the pole. So do have concerns. I'd love to see that at least limited to the 20-foot. And finally, the hotel. That was not in the original. Definitely concerned about a hotel with people coming in 24 hours a day. I travel a lot and go to a lot of hotels where there are contractors working. No matter what this hotel is now, 10 years down the road as it ages, I get concerned that being outside of town, this becomes the hotel of choice for contractors coming into town that are out in the parking lot, hours of the night, right in people's backyard. So that does concern me, having a hotel, no matter what they put now. So anyway, that's my comments. I appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Mr. Irvin. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Paula Benavish, and I live at 213 Margaret. And my question was, right now, we have a privacy fence at our backyard, and directly behind that is some younger trees and a whole bunch of brush and just a mess. But it's good because it's private, because at the time there's nothing back there. My question was there going to be a fence? You've been talking about all these bushes. Was there also going to be a fence? And if so, what is between that fence and my fence in my home? Is that going to be just 10 feet of weeds and everything else, or what would that be?
That would come up underneath the MOP, under the landscape, and the buffer is required, and, they would probably, I would assume, propose a fence. I'm not sure if they would or not.
The language we had required the fence where there's not one, there would be an 8-foot fence, and then the landscape, the drainage is there, so they're gonna have to get that cleaned up, but there would be a fence, and then.
So then there would be their fence, which was like a wooden privacy fence, or what is that?
That would come up. It would be a privacy.
And
that would be
then,
the purpose of it.
and then a bunch of weeds and trees that are like it's right now, and then our privacy fence.
Well, is your fence on the property line?
I don't know if it's on the property line. I think you probably have a little bit of space on the outside of your property line.
If their fence would probably be put right on the property line, so if yours is on the property line, there'd probably be no space between the two. Generally,
Okay.
that's how it works. Otherwise,
Okay, I was just worried we were gonna have like
3 feet off,
a
it's-
path, a 10-foot path between theirs and ours, where you can't even get, you couldn't even get behind there if you needed to,
No, if you're 3 feet off on your property line, then, or 10 feet off or 12 feet off, then you could certainly have that issue.
Okay,
But if your fence is on your property line, which normally, if they're not on the property line, they're pretty darn close to it.
okay. Because everybody's fence is pretty much they're all attached, they're all, equal together and everything on the back, so.
Right, so that's probably on the property line would be my guess.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Just walk up front, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Watch out for
I'm Tracy
wires.
Brown, yes. I'm at 239 Royal Lane. My house is right there on Orleans, and so I'm one of the directly affected for sure. Mostly our concerns are what's already been discussed here today. The brush that is there now at the end of Orleans is a very big buffer, and we appreciate that with Walmart and now the car wash that's across the street that we can hear the vacuum running 24/7, it feels like. But I guess I want to know a couple of things as far as with this landscape boundary. I know there are discussions with it. Is it possible to keep the trees possibly from like the drainage to our fence line? Is that a possibility of not taking out all of the trees? Because along that fence line, I believe there are good tall trees that are still going to remain there. And I think that would help as far as we go, is having not this visual hotel and complex in our backyard, which is directly, it affects about 6 houses directly on Royal Lane. That once those trees are scraped and these new pond trees or whatever the pretty trees are, they're not going to do that. And even an 8-foot fence is not going to give us what those trees can as far as noise and things like that. The golf cart trail, LSV, nice way to say it. That essentially is a parking lot right outside my house, if that's the proposal. I don't feel like a pedestrian path is necessary at this point to go into the complex if you have them coming from outside. There are sidewalks on Margaret, there are sidewalks on Fairhope Avenue. If you really want to bring it in, they can come in from the side. I personally, because obviously it's my property, but I just kind of went around and I asked homeowners in the neighborhood, because we on the perimeter were notified of this, but no other neighbors kind of far out in Idlewild were aware of all this. And so I just kind of literally went door to door talking to people, letting them know. About 95% had no idea this was a hotel. That was a shock to a lot of people. I not agreeing. I mean, they signed the petition, and I don't know where I'd do with that today, but I can talk to y'all after that. But those are just our main concerns. The lighting, I think, would help if the trees remain. It would help with the noise, and to keep that buffer on Orleans and not open that up as a pedestrian trail or a golf cart trail. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or concerns for the developer or for staff at this time? Yes, sir.
My name is Philip Wilson. I live at 231 Royal Lane, just up from the Browns. And my house would be the one where the drive-throughs coming right at my back window there. That being said, none of us would really want to see a development back here, but it's already zoned. The zoning's been there for some time. What we're striving to do is to make sure it is the best and accommodates the neighborhood as best as possible, as humanly possible, versus what could possibly go in there. The Klebans, Mr. Kleben, has been very forthcoming with us in what they're doing, what the plans are, meeting with things, adjusting their plans and everything, but they've been adjusted further. For instance, the screening, when it was originally presented, it was a lot of the screening were deciduous trees. So it was deciduous trees in the wintertime, that's not very good screening. And we recommended that they look at using Japanese cypress, as opposed to, they said, well, we're going to put arborvitaes in it. Well, arborvitaes in this area, in about 5 or 6 years, they die. They're fast growing, but they're very disease prone. They don't last. So we recommended a tree that is much less disease prone, grows just as fast, has a 30-foot height and a 15-foot to 20-foot spread in a very short amount of time. And they were willing to accept that and put that in. The golf cart path is a concern to a lot of the neighbors in there, because our street, Royal Lane and Margaret, are already cut-throughs to Walmart. And I understand what Stacy's saying about having a golf cart path cut right through there and on. But I understand also in talks with the city that this is part of the interconnectivity that the city is looking for, one way or the other. but it is a concern. I wanted to make you aware of that. They took out one, they happened to take out the one by my house, and kept the one down on Orleans Drive. I think that had something to do with the detention pond, I'm not sure, or the wetland area and everything. If they want to trade it and take it out by her house and move it up by mine, I'm okay with that. And they got to move it and make it go around. If y'all are going to insist on interconnectivity between a commercial development facing 181 and the residents behind it to the west. Another concern I have based on tonight is the fence. I can't tell you how many commercial developments I've seen all over the United States where a fence was required, and 3 years down the road, no one's maintaining the fence. You know, it becomes an eyesore. You know, it's worse if it's a painted block wall. Wood fences aren't a whole lot better. I'm not sure a fence really helps as much as maybe a berm and a landscape buffer would help, if there is room for that. I would like for you to consider, if at all possible, that the development might slide forward a little bit to give more of a buffer area with the neighborhood behind there, to accommodate the light bleed, the parking. Notice they did move the garbage clean out and everything to other parts of the development, away from the residence area on the back. And you know, there's just some tweaking. I'm sure I'll be back at the MOP whenever that is, if it's open to the public.
It is.
But these are considerations if you're tying anything in tonight, you know, landscaping, lighting, or anything like that to the ordinance that you're recommending. I would like for you to consider these things rather than having to work them out later. But the Clevens have been very open with us, very forthcoming. I wrote a letter to you some months ago about it. They've taken everything that we've asked of them into consideration. And did they agree to everything? No, they couldn't do that. But they have been very honest, I think, very honest and very forthcoming, and we want it to be the best development it can possibly be. I want something that's successful back there. One advantage of this building being there, ironically, is I get more pollution from noise pollution from that stupid car wash over in front of Walmart. Why in the world they weren't required to put a fence or a wall around that vacuum cleaner that could suck the grass out of all of Fairhope than I do light pollution and everything. Now, I'm concerned about light pollution once these trees down. If some of these trees can be saved, fine. That's good. The problem is that when you put in a drainage ditch, you tend to have to go much bigger to work back into it. So I don't envy you your plan there. But again, consideration to require a berm rather than wall, consideration to not be so steadfast on requiring deciduous trees in a buffer area. As a crown tree, as an over tree, that's fine. You know, they work good as accent and everything, but we need density, offset trees in a zigzag pattern to prevent light bleed and noise bleed as well. But I think the overall development will help us as far as the vacuum cleaner goes. So that being said, I will see you again in the future.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And I would like to put on the record, I have not used the vacuum cleaner there, and if you look in the floorboard of my truck, you'll find evidence of that. So, thank you for all of your comments. If no one else wishes to speak at this time, come ahead. If you have anything different, please bring it up, and otherwise, if people have said it, we've heard it.
Hi, I'm Dawn Wilson. I live at 101 Orleans Drive, so I'm right on the main drag of Idlewild Boulevard. And pretty much, we all agree with everything that the residents have already said. None of us are in disagreement, I believe, with anything regarding that. You know, obviously the noise in general, the busyness, landscaping, et cetera. Definitely no drive-through, and if we could not have a hotel, that would be fantastic. To give you an idea regarding light noise and why that should be a concern is where we are located. We are from where where Royal is. Our house is beyond the middle of the neighborhood, and we can still see the light noise just from everything at Walmart. I mean, it's ridiculous. We have commented, my husband and I, many a times, even on our back patio, of the quiet nights or the quiet Sunday mornings, just sitting out there with your cup of coffee are gone, because you can still hear the traffic going down 181 now. And I understand, you know, that's expanding, that's what it is, but that's only going to get so much worse with all of that publicity and people coming in and out of this shopping center. If you think that noise is going to be quiet in the middle of the night, it's not, especially with the hotel. If there is something to help make those parking spaces actually be at the front alongside of 181 instead of against the neighborhood, that would be a lot, just to help keep us for peace of mind of noise and safety. You know, you're not going to hear people coming in and out of their cars for the restaurants and whatnot. Keep the businesses then that are closer to the neighborhood and have them on the 8 to 5 business time frame. Again, to keep us with our privacy of our resident. Would you want that in your backyard? 40 feet buffer is about the length of this room. How much noise distance is that? So those are things for you to really consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? In that case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. So, somebody here from the developer want to come up? Would you like to? I was taking notes as people were talking, and the hottest items are obviously the access, the lighting, the hotel, the screening, and the buffering. If you could just talk to those items, kind of what y'all have done to try to protect the neighborhood back
I
there.
have one question for you. Is the fence required on the west property line also? Because we added it along with a buffer on the south side.
So the original, so this is, let me say this one more time. We just got a revised landscape plan Friday, so we've kind of seen different ones. And if there's anything that we're not clear about, that was it. So we put the requirements of the previously 2019 in there as a safeguard. That does present a little bit of a solution if we can't get to clarity on what that buffer looks like. Then we have a requirement in there for a fence that may not be the best solution, especially when there's already a fence in most of the places.
Okay, that's
Against the neighbors, maybe the landscape plan can address some of those things. But right now, I don't think there is a substantial enough buffer.
Well, and a lot of the issues, you know, I don't want to catch you off guard, not off guard, but prematurely, a lot of the issues did have to do with the landscape plan that'll come up later under the MOP, and I understand that. But there were a lot of concerns about the drive-through and kind of the shielding of the drive-through. What type of businesses are you?
They're talking like a coffee shop at the drive-through, I believe. Yes. Okay. And I think they got the hours of operation kind of listed on that.
Okay.
They've provided.
Yeah. And as far as the access, I know that's something that'll be worked out with the city when the landscape comes, isn't it, for the vehicles? And then, you know, a number of people mentioned possible berms. And you heard the comments. I mean, the big things when the landscape comes back, most of this is going to be access there, but the lighting, and like when we originally looked at this PUD, and I'm long enough into the tooth to remember that, the reasoning for the 10-foot lighting was, you know, the 10-foot was the requirement of the fence height. A lot of those on the commercial, so the idea was that the lighting and the fence were the same height, that then the light would be trapped in the back and wouldn't create light pollution. And I tell you, I was just talking to somebody that lives across the street from the Publix up on 104, and he said that you can't tell the light at all, and he's just right across the street from it.
Yeah, the newer lights seem, they got shields, and I guess you would probably know more about the shielding as far as the light, what they really need there.
Yeah, I mean, most of the shielding we get is typically on, it's for the color. And most of the shielding is for street lighting on road, lighting the road.
Right.
So that's, it's a little more, I mean, you get cut-off lights, LED cut-offs, but the problem is if you get them on 24 feet, you're still going to see them. That's why I love it.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so.
And I do have some concerns there, because there's actually an elevation, as you get Orleans, the one to the north, it's actually rising. but-
It's almost 5-foot elevation change from Orleans
So you
Street to
put-
the site.
Yeah, so you put that elevation and then a taller light on top of that,
Which is higher?
their site.
Y'all are
Yeah.
taller than 5 feet,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
It's pretty good bit higher.
Yeah, so I would
Do
think,
want- Steve or the landscape architect, is there, we talked about this early on, but is there anything within either that drainage easement or the other 20 feet of the landscape architect that can be saved? Any of the existing?
I would like to see anything that can be saved there, because, I mean, the less area you disturb, is the less area you gotta worry about, sediment or anything getting into the wetlands or anything like that, so.
Your grading in the landscape buffer is where all the grading
Yeah,
happens.
yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think, can we accommodate any saving there? Is there any tweaks when we get to the MOP to change that grading plan so we're not scraping everything?
That has to do with the
You
engineering.
really
and
had to
the
go in
road.
there and do it with small equipment. You couldn't take a big, large piece of equipment and go in there and try to do it. You would have to go in there with a smaller type of equipment, try to figure out what you can save.
During construction, could we keep the drainage easement undisturbed? Would that be feasible, or do you need to get in there to, as far as the drainage easement itself?
I think it could be a later phase of the development.
That doesn't resolve everything, but at least maybe get some plants established on one side before the other.
So are we saying that we can do without the fence on that west side? Is that what we're saying? Thinking about, I mean, is that a possibility is what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think you can accommodate the spring without a fence. I think there will
I
be,
like
need
that.
to be
You know,
a couple of areas that
like-
need the fence. Remember the area that we showed on the front end where there's nothing now?
Well, I want to go back. My memory is pretty good. Once again, I remember this because they presented it to us. And that first night, Rebecca, once again, brought this up. And we all of us were like, yeah, we don't want a fence there. It would be much nicer to keep it natural. And you guys agreed to that as well. And I don't know when that changed or what happened, but I'm just remembering and reminding that it could be an easy fix, because at one point we were all in agreement of that. And I don't know if you guys remember that or not, but I do. So I think that's something hopefully we can come to a win-win on.
well, and also, again, this is gonna come back in the MOP.
Right.
In great detail, because obviously if a fence were allowed over the entire property line, there'd be one going right through the middle of the retention pond, which would be kind of an interesting feature. So,
Yeah, a
so
dense
that would be-
buffer is really good. The only problem is that you have to kind of keep in mind is during certain parts of the year, you lose a lot of the density unless you have something that's going to stay green in that area.
Right.
So, because I've seen it, we've done it before, to where you go in there in August, it's thick and beautiful, in January, it's all dead. It just doesn't, and it doesn't appear, the vegetation hadn't changed, just the foliage is left, so.
So, speaking to that, I mean, I'm kind of trying to zoom in on the landscape plan, but it just it looks like one row. And I see that what Hunter wanted to go back to was 3 rows, but 2 of those are shrubs. And I think, the homeowners can't even see the shrubs beneath I thought our typical buffer was either undisturbed or 2 rows of trees. staggered.
Those are still the, I mean, it says holly, so that, you got some pretty large, I mean, you can get some taller holly.
But I wouldn't want to just require 15-gallon shrubs without clarifying that so the intent is for it to be evergreen and tall and, you know.
And I think what they propose could be one of the components. And, you know, I mean, I'd love to see a plan that accommodates everything. I think maybe, you know, something that grows fast but may not be long-lived, but provides immediate screening and something that matures, you know, whether that's magnolias or something that has some density. Yeah, that's something to be resolved in a landscape plan that is clear. I think we're all in agreement on what this needs to be. It's a landscape buffer that doesn't need to be an unmaintained fence. But there may need to be a fence section here or there where there's nothing.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't box ourselves in with any, we leave ourselves open to require that when we come back and are talking about the details.
Yeah, and
Is there already a ditch back there?
there is, it's very flat.
But
and-
it's more of a swale.
Yes, sir, that's exactly
Okay.
what it is.
Question,
Okay.
why would it be, thinking about it from an Idlewild standpoint, you gotta, if you're gonna dig it, if you're gonna have to maintain that ditch, you're gonna have to dig the ditch, you gotta get a piece of equipment there.
Yes, sir.
It have to be a pretty good piece of equipment. You have to have an area that you will be able to operate that piece of equipment. And you're not gonna do it on a ditch that's only 20 feet across.
Yes, sir.
Why can't you just flip them? Why can't the ditch be on the inside of the development? You've got, if you look at the aerial and the vegetation that's currently there, you've got, I mean, then you don't have to get through all of that. In fact, you're not even gonna have to disturb a lot of that vegetation if you just flip them.
Right.
I mean, I think maybe for these people, it would solve an issue and maybe even save y'all some money.
Well, it would be easier to leave it undisturbed
It
and
would-
let everything do what it's doing
And then
right
you've
now.
got a working alley to be able to work your ditch in the future. But to have to keep taking a traco in there to clean the ditch
Right.
out or do whatever, you're gonna constantly be tearing that buffer up. I mean, there's no other way to get to it. So if you can just flop them, then you've already got a lot of your area, it appears on the aerial photograph, that a lot of your area is already heavily, I know a lot of it's privet, and a
Yes.
lot of it is on the ground is coving grass. But at the same time, I mean, you've got something in terms of elevated foliage that you can
Yes,
work
sir.
with.
I agree with that.
Anyway, that's
That's-
my thought.
I think that's a good point.
Any other questions for the developer at this time?
Oh, sorry.
We didn't touch on the pedestrian golf cart, the vehicle, the new code.
So,
That was a big topic we need to bring up.
I think that's gonna be brought up that'd be coming to the landscape as well. Would it not?
I mean, that's kind of a
I don't think-
connectivity. I mean, I'm a proponent. I think we made accommodations early on in 2009 not to have full vehicular access to this intersection. As y'all know, this comes up all the time, and nobody ever wants connectivity through their neighborhoods. These stub streets are there for a reason. They were built for a reason. When Idlewild was built, it was implied that there would be connectivity. I don't think we're gonna have a thoroughfare of
So-
low-speed vehicles running through. But that does, as y'all know, we discuss it all the time, and I'm saying this more for the benefit of Idlewild residents. Those connectivity keeps the roads from being overcrowded. If everything is not connected, we have sprawl. That's the definition.
All
of
the
what
roads,
that
and
is.
also it's for someone in Idlewild that wants to go to one of the restaurants.
yeah, that's
You don't
not-
have to
I'm
go out
just
onto,
thinking that's-
you don't have to go out onto Fairhope Avenue and then to 181 and then back in. It's just a
Right.
lot safer, quicker, and more pleasant, and maybe you could even walk in there.
Lee, question,
So-
clarification. One of the community residents was speaking on flow of traffic through the neighborhood. Can cars, not LSVs, get through there?
Yes.
They, no, they're not. They
can't
they
get
canceled the road. So I just want
Oh,
to,
through there, I thought you meant through to Walmart currently. He was talking about currently, he said people will take that neighbor Idlewild as a shortcut.
yeah, like they were worried about increased flow cut-throughs.
Yeah.
Can they go all the way through that neighborhood with this creation of this development?
You can come through Nature's Trail from Morphe, Nature's Trail, all the way through to Margaret Drive to Walmart. But
With a car?
the general public is not gonna make that effort
That's right.
to do that.
I'm just gonna talk about
That's
that.
gonna be people
All right.
that live in that
Right,
neighborhood.
that's for the people that
vehicle is.
will not be able to make it. That's what I thought. So I want to make sure that people are aware of that, because I heard the residents say that, and I just want to bring that up. Secondly, those LSVs are not supposed to be on Fairhope Avenue. If they are, I know they do it, but they're not supposed to be on Fairhope Avenue. I think Fairhope Avenue changes from, is it 35 to another, yeah, but the law is if it changes at all, the Alabama state law is, if it changes at all, you're illegal, okay? So that's gonna be on the city to start tamping that down, because that's illegal.
So
you know?
downtown Fairhope Avenue, you can't drive a golf
So,
cart?
yeah, but that doesn't change. It stays
That's the
consistent
same
in that
road, though.
downtown. It's the same, so they're not supposed to. We gotta fix that, is what I'm saying. When you're traveling all the way up there to cross over, you're not supposed to. And then also, the Fairhope police have stated that on a public road, it's their interpretation whether it's safe or not, as far as the law. So that's something that we can work on. I'm just talking to the residents as far as them worried about those LSVs. We're hearing that. That's something that we can work on, that the police department can work on to prevent that attack on you guys' space with LSVs. Even though there's a small area for them in the neighborhood, I don't think you're gonna have people traveling across town in their LSVs.
It would take 2 hours.
Yeah, to get to that neighborhood. And they will be stopped if they attempt, and we will stamp that out, okay? Just to put that out there.
Any other questions for the,
I would like to address your question about the berm. The berm's a great idea. There is some drainage.
please talk to
going-
the microphone.
I'm sorry.
We're not
There
gonna
i-
go back and forth. You're
Okay.
talking to the commissioners here,
Okay.
if you will.
Well, there is some drainage going that direction. I know there's one pipe that we found over there. I can't remember if there was an additional one, but, you would kind of block the drainage by putting a berm there.
Well, and also,
The neighborhood to the soil.
well, the problem is if you're 5 feet above anyway, then you have to have about a 15-foot berm to get what
Yeah.
you want to do. It's just sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I have one last question.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So y'all will be responsible for maintaining of the ponds and any kind of fence, vegetation, berm,
Yes,
whatever?
ma'am.
Okay, just want to confirm that.
I think that
Because I
would
know
be
that
a
was
maintenance
Idlewild
obligation.
pond maintenance was something that was brought up.
That O&M plan is, typically we focus on drainage, but that would be, anything that's maintained, and this is being proposed as a single owner, managing everything.
All right. Anything else? All right, thank you,
All
sir.
right, thank you.
All right, commissioners? Any further questions for staff? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Just my question, if we're going to add the landscaping buffer requirements that Hunter was suggesting from the previous PUD. Sorry, I turned it off. If we were going to add those landscape and buffer requirements from the previous PUD that Hunter was suggesting, I would suggest we say 2 rows of trees, 1 row of shrubs.
This is not the final.
I think we should definitely mention the lighting, because that's a big issue, and I think we should maybe mention, if Chris thinks it would work, if that's your concern, rather than, try to determine landscaping here when they haven't gone out and hit all the elevations yet, and they're coming back with a mop. I'd rather put something in the motion, just giving them a heads up that we're gonna be very concerned at the mop,
A significant landscape
the
buffer.
significant landscape buffer, what that might mean, that they've heard the people here today and the concerns that, that's one of the biggest issues that obviously everybody here has, especially with the 2-story motel being proposed. So, the public hearing's closed now, sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm right on time. Oh, wait, I'm a landscape architect. I'm the landscape architect on the Boardwalk Village, and I just wanted to clarify and say that we hear what the residents are saying.
Okay.
I drive by on Marchand, the tennis courts every night, and I'm waiting to see raccoons in people's front yards reading books. It's bright, and they've done what they can to, but it's still bright, and I totally get that, and we will address that. And the lights we're using, like the gentleman pointed out, the new LED lights. There's so many more options available with the cutoff in the back, as well as these lights actually have that you can dim them. But on the other side of the coin, we do have to adhere to what is appropriate for the health, safety, and welfare of people navigating the site after hours. But I wouldn't want that in my backyard either. So anyway, I think we're hearing what you're saying, and I think they may have subconsciously, they went ahead and changed that drainage easement versus the buffer, the landscape buffer. But anyway, really good feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But I think we,
this is
you know,
not
if
the
that's a
final, right?
concern, I think you should put in that, you know, significant landscape buffer, so they know that that's going to be something that's going to be looked at. Also, something I'll mention to the folks in Idlewild, when the Spanish Fort built a football field up next door to my father-in-law's house, he planted a pretty nice little buffer of trees on his side of the fence, and it's amazing how fast they've grown. So you might want to, you know, go to Old Time Feed or somewhere and look at getting a couple others to kind of add another layer on yourself.
Rebecca, just to mention, if you wanted to amend that item 3 as we proposed, you can do that to the screen. So if you want to be a little more general, heavily landscape.
Am I being nudged to make a motion?
You could say number
Or
3.
someone, you
Yeah,
brought it up.
I
so
know, I know,
whoever
I
would
know.
like to make the motion.
I can make a motion.
To a minimum and preferably, you know.
Lighting and buffer.
I know that's why I think everybody was pausing, like how to put that. So I'll take a stab at it, and I'm open to some nudging along the way. I know you love that, sorry. I'd like to make a motion that we recommend approval of KCC 2206 with the following conditions. There were 1 and 2, and condition number 3, that we are looking for significant landscape screening and buffers and light pollution prevention. With the buffers similar to Ordinance 1402 as a minimum, but with 2 rows of trees on the south side at a minimum. Number 4 is okay as written. Did that capture it?
Well, if,
You got that, Alan?
To city council.
I would maybe add to that the potential.
Hold up, Chris can have a question.
3 and 4, the lighting should be separate from the buffer, correct?
Discussion on the motions that happen before a motion starts.
Yeah.
So let's work what the motion will be.
That's the
Let's
motion.
just make the
get a
amendment
second,
since
and
we're
then with further
making an
discussion,
amendment.
We can see if they want to change the
She's
motion.
just make an amendment first.
Because
and
then I just retract it and we redo
No,
it.
then we can
do I have
discuss
a-
it.
If we-
Yeah, do
sorry.
I have a second?
Second.
All right.
Just for
Further discussion.
clarification, I'm sorry, just for clarification and understanding your intent, are you suggesting that the landscape, the details of the landscape buffer and the lighting also be part of the MOP review to be submitted and approved by y'all?
Yeah.
At the
Yes.
MOP review? I mean, that's your trigger of when it needs to be approved, is the MOP?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct. So I think just specifying in your motion the details you're looking for, but to clarify that that will come for final review from this body at the MOP review.
Yeah. So the conditions 1 and 2 are required for city council. Condition 3, we are looking for the MOP
You
review.
can recommend it to city council, but city council has the ability to add, right? Add to it and then, or add a different characteristic that they see appropriate.
Mhm.
And then under the MOP review, it would come back before y'all and you can address some of the technical details, including the landscape buffering and the lighting. And that would be your final decision because that would not go back to city council for those aspects.
Yeah. So I just meant that what we're talking about is the condition number 3 is a condition that we are looking to be satisfied in the MOP review. So I was agreeing with your clarification, but not clear if we need to add more language to say that we can just agree with the clarification.
Do we need to add more language, Chris, do you
I
think?
just wanted to somewhere put in there that I don't necessarily want to commit or make them commit right here to flopping the drainage ditch with the
That's landscape.
with the existing tree buffer that's there. But
That makes a lot of sense.
it certainly would make a lot of sense because for a lot of reasons I've already stated. I'm not going to state them again.
In the short run, that might be true. You know, the long run, if they're already getting light pollution and noise pollution from Walmart, maybe that privet's not doing much good. If it's, you know.
But it'd give you something to work with to where you could fill it in if you got rid of the privet. Getting rid of the privet would be a great deal anyway.
There's a challenge there that kind of changes, sorry, there's a challenge there that changes, I think, the whole project, because as we've seen, it's graded in the landscape buffer
Yeah.
to elevate the whole site, to get the drainage flowing to the north. If you flip those, I don't know how.
Looking at the topo, I don't see that there's a great bit of difference. Why that tree line is there, because they couldn't farm it. If they could have farmed it, they would have farmed it. Anyway, it's something for,
Well, is that
That would-
something we,
they're gonna tear the buffer up whenever they've gotta go in to do any work on that drainage ditch, if it's between the existing landowners and the buffer strip, because it's only 20 feet. I mean, a track over is almost 20 feet by itself, at least 10 feet.
no, I mean, I agree, it's a good idea, I'm just trying to.
Anyway, they
I
gotta
don't
put
know
the
if-
material, whatever they dig out of it, they're gonna have to put it somewhere, so how are you gonna get it out without tearing the buffer up?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense.
So you can just put in 3 to maintain the natural buffer as a screening, the natural buffer uninterrupted,
And maybe
along with.
I think we
Yes.
need to look
And
at
maybe
it.
we just leave it, let them figure it out. If they wanna figure it out, let them figure it out. If they don't, and if they tear the buffer up and they wanna leave it like it is, they can leave it like it is, and then tear the buffer up and have to go back and put the buffer back.
Well,
If you don't like the solution they provide in the MOP, we can hold it off a month and send them back to the drawing board.
Mhm.
yeah,
It's
I
gonna
think
come down to that
the
anyway.
intent of the intent of the way that I was wording it was to encourage them to have a really strong buffer.
Yes, we
And
understand.
then we're gonna
Rebecca.
review that in the MOP
Yeah.
because it seems like there's 2 or 3 ways to get there.
I think they're hearing us. I don't think we have to really put it into motion right now because it has to come back to us. And if we don't like it, then they have to do it as it should be done correctly.
Do you feel comfortable with that, Chris?
So, yeah.
Do you feel comfortable with not memorializing that statement in the motion, or do you think?
So long as it's clear that,
Do you think Rebecca needs to restate the motion, or do you feel like it's pretty clear that?
I would like Rebecca to restate the motion.
Okay.
Does
I'm
she need
sorry.
to put the MOP in there?
There's been a lot of discussion since then, so.
There has,
You want her to have the MOP in there? Is that the best route? Okay, just,
okay. But that's really the only thing we're changing because the rest is, we're good with okay, so we recommend approval of KCC 2206 with the following conditions, 1 and 2 as written. Number 3, provide a strong evergreen landscape screening and buffer and significant light pollution prevention. with, with a minimum as required in ordinance. Okay, just
to be reviewed at the mall.
to be reviewed at the MOP. Number 4 is written.
Yeah, perfect.
Second.
I have a great motion. Do I have a second? I've got a second from Corey. Thank you, sir.
You're
Any
welcome.
further discussion? All in favor to recommend approval to the staff, subject to the 4 items, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously.
Takes a village.
All right.
Yeah, I
Next
know.
item on the agenda is ZC 2215. This is, okay.
I think it, oh. Okay.
All right, this is a public hearing. Again, we will make this is a zoning change, going from a PUD to an R1 zoning if the request is approved. And again, on zoning changes, we simply make recommendations to the city council because they're the only folks that can make ordinances. So, with that said, Mike?
Good evening. Mike Jeffries with the City of Fairhope. As you said, this is a rezoning from a planned unit development to R1 request. Not very common that we see this, but going in, the applicant is Kathy Barnett with Dewberry, acting on behalf of the owner, Live Oak Properties, LLC, going from a planned unit development to R1, a low-density single-family district. The property is approximately 3.79 acres and is located on the east side of Main Street, just south of Parker Road. The applicant no longer desires to develop the property due to the cost of development currently. On your screen on the left is the zoning map highlighted in blue, and that shade of blue is the property. The yellow color is R1, so this property is almost 95% already surrounded by R1. Right side is an aerial vegetated with trees and grasses. A little history on the property. It was approved January 12, 2009. Here are some of the following requirements that it had. A snip of the site plan on the right shows that it was an 8-lot subdivision, kind of a cul-de-sac lot. It had a front setback of 15 foot, rear of 20, side of 10, and a garage setback of 20. It did have required landscape buffers, creating a dense buffer along Scenic Highway 98 and Parker Road. The building height was determined to be measured at 35 feet, to be measured from the finished floor to the peak of the roof. Sidewalks internally were to be routed for maximum tree preservation and required the sidewalk being added along Parker Road. If approved, this rezoning to R1 would essentially erase the requirements we just talked about of that PUD, and any future development would have to conform to the R1 dimension standards and meet the requirements of the subdivision regulations. On the screen, you can see that the setbacks are 40-foot front, 35-foot rear with 10-foot sides. This is a potential layout using the R1 standards that was provided with that minimum of 100-foot wide. This was one of about 2 only configurations that could be accomplished with the R1. So creating 4 lots, 3 of them fronting along Main Street, 1 fronting along Parker. Staff recommends approval of case ZC 22.15, the rezoning from a PUD to R1. The applicant, Ms. Barnett, is with us this evening, can answer questions on behalf of the owner, and I can answer questions on behalf of staff.
All right, thank you. Would somebody here wish to speak on behalf of the owner? Do you have anything to add? If not, I'll open the public hearing.
Mr. Haley's sick at home, otherwise he'd be here as well.
Okay, thank you so much. In that case, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Does anybody wish to speak to this item? And this is, if you'll come up and say your name and address in it. There's no plan on this, by the way. This is just a request for a zoning change. So this would just change it to R1, and if someone were to purchase this property, they would have to draw a subdivision and come in and get it approved by the city council. And the city council at that point would approve or deny the subdivision. It would not go to, it would come to the Planning and Zoning Commission. If the zoning is approved by the city to be R1, our recommendation, and then the city council were to approve it, then that just makes the land R1. That doesn't approve any subdivision at all. So if somebody purchased the property, they would have to get an engineer to draw a subdivision and then come back and get that approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission, who does have that ultimate authority. But I'm sorry, James, go ahead and state your name.
James Allen, I'm at 7270 JV Cummings Drive. My property backs up to the property that's asked to be rezoned. So my question probably is, at what point? And when this was approved as a PUD, the developer spoke to me and asked me not to oppose it because he would agree that he would put a buffer zone at my property line, which I have a buffer zone. But then he reneged on that when y'all approved it. At what point could this body or the city, either one, require a buffer zone to be put in?
Well, there's a required buffer zone in R1 between.
Just setbacks, setbacks.
Residential to residential.
So from residential to residential would not require a buffer zone.
But it is illegal to watershed on someone else.
Right.
Right.
Well, you have setbacks. I mean, you know, you have your, what's the R1 rear setback? 35 feet. So they couldn't build within 35 feet of the back of their property.
Unless it was an accessory building, I mean, your garage could be.
Right. But basically what you're doing is he can get within 35 feet of my property line with his building.
Yeah,
And
His
nobody
primary
can, and
residence.
nobody can require him to put a buffer in.
That's right.
That's correct.
And because at R1, he doesn't have to do a subdivision, he can sell just individual lots.
He has to do a subdivision.
He does have to.
And he divides the one big property into individual lots. And just like you don't have to put a buffer, they're just like you now. You're residential, he's residential. We don't require you to put a buffer between him. We don't
But my
require him
PUD
to
did.
put one between you.
My PUD did. A PUD could,
A PUD could, yes, sir.
but not just rezoning. And I think that's how he gets around putting a buffer in is by doing a
Well, with
Well, with
rezoning.
R1, he doesn't get 8 lots.
Well,
Yeah.
No, there
originally-
were only, the maximum number of lots that he could get based off the dimensional standards would be a total of 4 lots, and these would be 1 acre lots.
Okay, let me ask the question then. The depth of the long lot that butts up to my property, what's the width of it?
So that
100 feet.
So that lot doesn't exist anymore. It's just raw land.
So it would have to be a minimum of 100 feet.
That subdivision that you see in this
It's gone.
handout is not a subdivision.
Yeah,
That's
it's
just, that's an example.
I
It's not, it's just,
So go to that one. The lot that's, the long lot that's on the right side of that.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, staff can make some guesses, but the bottom line is the lot's got to be a,
That,
let me just
that would
finish.
that would be a 10, your property would be a 10-foot setback
10 foot.
from that lot if they came through and got a subdivision with this
So it
orientation.
would be facing Parker, so that would be a side setback rather than a back setback.
Well, I
With-
mean, I
with
think-
this orientation.
I'm not comfortable with this, guys. This is R1 that we're asking to zone. We don't know what a developer's gonna come in and do. He may wanna do some funky road off of some other direction, and that could be a front or a back or a side. I don't think we need to try to.
He's just asking
I don't think we need to try to guess. I mean, you can make some ideas of how they'll draw it to maximize the number of lots. But with that said, somebody could just come in and buy it and put their own house in there and just have one house.
They
Somebody.
just do 2 lots.
I mean, somebody could do 2 lots, so
Yeah.
we just don't know, but the bottom line is it has to be 100 feet wide. It's gotta be 15,000 square feet, and they've gotta meet the R1 setbacks, which are the most stringent that we have in a residential zoning. But as far as whether they come in and try to maximize with 4 lots, or 3 lots, or 2 lots, or, you know, Mr. Gottbucks just puts one nice big house in there. I mean,
So
And
he can do whatever he wants to with it.
Within R1, and the reason that there's more requirements in the PUD is that that's the trade-off with allowing more density. So if you allow more people in there with the PUD, then you try to buffer that by having,
right,
but that's not what's happening.
so there won't be nearly as many houses here where they've got it drawn for 8 on an R1. What the staff is saying is the max they could get is 4 lots. Whether they try to get 4 lots or how they lay 4 lots out, we don't know, but just without us going out with elevations and doing an engineer's job, which we're not, the staff is just saying, yeah, they could probably get a max of 4 lots, no more just because of the square footage.
it's all hypothetical.
But that's just hypothetical.
Yeah.
So this lot layout is purely hypothetical also.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Yes, sir. That's what we're trying to.
That's
Why
cool.
we here.
Well, just
we're
to
here
do the
because-
zoning.
We're here because it's a rezoning.
It's a rezoning, yes,
And to
But it
answer,
doesn't give me any protection to my property or the four people's property, my three neighbors who back up to that
It
property.
gives you a
It gives-
maximum of 4 neighbors as opposed to 8.
Yeah, but that one lot could give me a neighbor that's 10 feet from my property line.
Hypothetically.
hypothetically.
Hypothetically,
Sure.
yes, sir, if that's what
Yeah.
we're speaking.
Yeah, and I'm trying to prevent that.
Right.
Amen.
And you can't prevent hypotheticals. I
That's
understand.
right. So we don't know if that's gonna happen.
And originally, just for a little bit of history of this, when this PUD was approved, that land was one of those odd pieces that was unzoned. So somebody could have come in and put a, you know, a beverage warehouse in next
laundromat.
to you, or a laundromat, or what have you.
Or a
So
fire
this-
station.
So this was kind of a
Strip
bit of a compromise with them, giving a little bit more density, but then requiring to keep it residential. This is the lowest density zoning that the city has, so it's kind of hard for us to, you know,
It
oppose
just
that.
throws, when you throw that potential lot layout, that one long skinny lot really gives me heartburn.
Yes.
Well, let me just say this, as many times as I've been to Mellow Mushroom the last couple of months, you ought to buy it yourself and just have it extend your yard over there. I know you could afford it.
That's what I was gonna say, buy that and you have a really big backyard.
I'm spending a lot of money right now remodeling my property up there, so I'm spending a lot of money. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? All right, again, we just make a recommendation, and once the city council, you know, votes on it, if they do vote, you know, if we make a recommendation to approve, and they approve, it's just R1 zoning, and somebody else, you know, have to bring in a subdivision. Yes, ma'am.
Kathy Barnett with Dewberry. Just as a clarification, yeah, the parcel is all requesting R1, right, as you know. We put the 4-lot subdivision in front of you so you could see that that would be the potential, and that the decreased density from 8 to 4 was fairly significant for the use that was possible. The lot layout also does show that the setbacks would be conforming if that layout does move forward. So we understand fully the next step would be a subdivision if that's the course of action that's proceeded and what that configuration would be. We were just trying to show the maximum density as possible within the compliance of the regs so that you would kind of know what could happen and answer questions for zoning. Obviously, the setbacks do create a buffer. There are the accessory building exemptions, but these are large lots that aren't dense, so we don't really see that as a concern. So we hear what you're saying, but the site plan seems pretty solid.
Sure.
And not an hour and a half discussion, hopefully.
Well, and you have to understand, I've been, you know, on this board for 24 years now, and I have seen people so often get zonings and say, hey, we want a B4 zoning, or we want a B2 zoning because we're going to do X, Y, Z. But once it's zoned, people can do whatever that basket of rights is that they do. And, you know, I could drive you around and just point to dozens of them. So I just like to say this is R1 zoning. You know, look at the ordinance. I don't mean that rudely, but I'm just saying that there are so many options. And one thing for seriously that you might want to do if you're concerned about a buffer is see if they'll sell you a 5-foot strip on a per square foot basis or something. And yes, but I mean, there are things like that, you know, you could do. You want to talk to staff and make sure that they could do a, you know, as long as no lots are created or not created in certain cases, they can do a administrative lot line. I'm not saying they can, but in certain cases they can. You know, if you wanted to look at buying a few feet here or there, and it wouldn't necessarily, you know, change that, but that is something to ask and check into.
And just one more point, we did overlay the tree protection and the size of the lots, but just as a point of fact, and the way that configuration, we didn't look like we needed to lose any trees either. So it was in compliance of the significant trees that are already part of the ordinance. So, you know, when that was conceived, it was trying to take into account the uniqueness of the site and the protected trees that had already been identified in the previous PUD.
Thank you, thank you. All right. I'll go ahead and close the and nobody else wishes to speak to this item? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and turn the meeting over to the commissioners.
Motion, Mr. Chairman. Case ZC 22.15 Park Road PUD. I recommend that we make a recommendation to the city council to approve.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to
What you got?
To recommend approval for ZC 22.15. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right, motion passes unanimously.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that.
All right, last item on the agenda is Colonial Acres re-subdivision.
They didn't put zoning, I was worried about that. Yeah.
I'm gonna make it as quick as possible. Just skip to the end. So this case has come before you guys before, probably about 6 months ago. And it's a request for a 3-lot subdivision. The property is zoned R1, and it is located at the intersection of Highway 104 and Greeno Road. The lot layout has not changed since the last time you guys have seen it. We put in the packets the conditions of approval with the May 2nd Planning Commission meeting. The majority of the conditions were met. The primary one was that the, number 5, the inspection and approval of the completed sidewalks along Hancock Road and Lafayette Road were to be inspected by the building department. They were not able to complete that within the 120-day window that was required. So they're coming back before you guys today to re-request it.
And this is not a public hearing, is it? It is a public hearing, okay. All right, thank you. Any questions for staff at this time? So we're basically just, I'm
Yeah,
sorry?
you're good. We do have 2 conditions, really. It's just, as Buford would say, memorializing a couple of things. Let's see. The buffer shown on the plan shall remain natural, except with the allowance of plant materials to be installed where a visual buffer does not exist and a potential pedestrian path within the proposed pedestrian access easement. And then where a visual buffer does not exist within buffer areas shown on the plan or required by a condition of approval, plant materials shall be installed to provide a visual barrier. Staff does recommend the case subject to these conditions, and the applicant is here to answer any questions that you may have.
Those are the only conditions because the other ones were satisfied already?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so basically just, this is more along the lines, just an extension then, in that case. Okay, any questions for staff? Thank you so much. This is a public hearing. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Does anybody wish to speak to this item? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time. Commissioners?
Motion, Mr. Chairman, SD 2229, Colonial Acres re-subdivision. I move we approve staff recommendation.
I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve subject to staff recommendation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. This ends the scheduled portion of our meeting. We do have a recommendation to have a executive session. What that is that's a session that we can meet with our attorney privately to discuss only litigation. And at the end of that, we do have to come back into the meeting, open it and close it, but I will tell you that we will talk about no more business nor have any more motions at the end, so there's no reason to sit around and wait unless you just wish to speak to one of us afterwards and tell us how wonderful we are. Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for the record, I've submitted a declaration and opinion under Alabama Code 3625A-7, subsection A, number 3, recommending the Planning Commission go into executive session to discuss pending or potential litigation. I will advise the commission if any deliberations of business nature are discussed, that we reconvene the meeting, come back to the public portion of the meeting, but otherwise, all discussions about pending or potential litigation be subject to attorney-client privilege. And I've submitted a written declaration to that effect for the record of the Planning Commission.
We cannot end the meeting now, though, right?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any further? I thought somebody could have motioned that we go to Mellow Mushroom after I make my comment, which I'd be up for. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
for no.
Do I have a motion to adjourn, and do I have a
All in
second?
favor?
Any further, all in favor, say aye. Thank you. Connor doesn't get to adjourn, though. He